Welcome back, class. We're going to be talking about Moses today. And I'm going to rely on my notes a lot because I've got a lot of details to tell you. But again, we're on the handout. We're talking about Moses and the law of Israel. So if you recall, the last time we talked about the Hebrews being in Egypt during a time of great oppression by the Egyptians. Moses is going to be the one to lead the people out of Egypt and into the promised land. So remember, a land was promised to Abraham. So the promised land is the land of Canaan. The problem is the Canaanites live in that land. So we have to get the people out of Egypt and into the promised land. And this is also going to be a story that gives us the constitution of a nation, the nation of Israel. So how do we get from 2 million people being oppressed in Egypt to a new nation? Okay, so that's the story we want to tell this time. So Moses comes to have faith in the promise. Oh, yeah, I should give you some background. The Hebrew midwives were told by Pharaoh to kill the babies. Kill all the male babies that are born. Well, the midwives don't. And they end up allowing the babies to survive. And Pharaoh says, okay, let's kill all the babies that are 2 years old or younger. Moses' mother knew he was no ordinary child, and she didn't want to kill the baby, so she put him in a basket and put the basket into the river, the Nile. And Moses has a sister who's older, and his sister followed the basket to see where it would go. And Moses started crying, and the basket ended up in the presence of Pharaoh's daughter. She heard Moses crying, and she said, oh, this is one of the Hebrew babies. And she rescued him, and his sister said, would you like me to go get one of the Hebrews to nurse the baby? So Pharaoh's daughter said, yes, go get a Hebrew woman to nurse the baby. And Moses' sister went and got Moses' mother. And Moses' mother was able to care for him until he was weaned. And then he went and lived in Pharaoh's household. His mother raised him knowing that he was a Hebrew, knowing the God of his people, and knowing about the promise. So he's raised in Pharaoh's household, and he is raised in all the glories of Egypt. He has the education of the Egyptians and lives in luxury. But he identifies with the Hebrews. About the time he's 40 years old, he sees a Hebrew being beaten by an Egyptian, and he goes and kills the Egyptian, and he buries the Egyptian in the sand. The next day, some Hebrews are out fighting, and he tries to break up their quarrel, and they say to him, who are you? What are you going to do? Kill us like you killed the Egyptian? And then he realized someone knew about this, and he was going to be in trouble with Pharaoh. So Moses flees. He's 40 years old. He thinks that he's going to be recognized as the Redeemer of Israel by doing this, but he's not. And so he flees to the desert, and he tried it his way, and his way didn't work. And so now he's in the backside of the wilderness. He marries a woman in the desert. He rescues her from some shepherds that are accosting her, and he ends up marrying her and living with her and her family there. He ends up being a shepherd for 40 years, and he's on the backside of the desert for 40 years, probably thinking about his life, about God. And he knows God. He is devoted to God. And when he's 80 years old, God calls him from a burning bush. And he says, Moses, take off your shoes. The place where you are standing is holy ground. Now, Moses doesn't question it. He listens and he does it. So this means he already knows who God is. He already knows that God is a redeemer and God communicates to his people. And he probably already knows that God hears the oppression of the Israelites, Hebrews that are in Egypt. So God calls him to go and rescue his people out of Egypt. And Moses doesn't want to do this. He's resistant, but eventually God gives him power to perform miracles and says that these miracles will be a sign that I have sent you. And Moses says, when I go back to the Israelites, who shall I say has sent me? And God tells him his name. God says, tell them, I am sent you. And he says, I am that I am, which means I am the eternal one. I am the self-existent one. So God reveals his name to Moses. Okay, eventually Aaron, Moses' brother, comes and is going to be the spokesperson. Moses claims he's not a good public speaker. He doesn't want to do this, but God sends Aaron. So Moses will receive the word from God, give it to Aaron, and Aaron will give it to the people. So this is going to be the ideal prophet receiving the word from God and priest ministering that word to the people, and Aaron will represent the people to God and represent God to the people as a priest. They're types. They're going to be typical. Okay. So Aaron and Moses go to Pharaoh and they say, let my people go. Pharaoh is resistant. He is going to make the work of the Hebrews more intense because of this. And he is going to resist the request of Moses. And as he resists, the curse will intensify. So remember the curse and the promise. The more the request is resisted, the more the curse intensifies. So the curse comes in the form of 10 plagues, and these are also going to be judgments on the gods of Egypt. Now you can Google this and see which gods are being judged in each of these plagues. But each plague is going to be more intense than the last, and there's 10 total. So I'll just tell you what some of these plagues are. Well, all of them. The first plague is the water of the Nile is turned into blood. Now, this is something the Egyptian magicians can replicate, so they're not super impressed by this. The second plague is a horde of frogs. Now, after each of these plagues, Pharaoh says, okay, I relent. I was wrong. Yeah, you can go. But he always hedges, like all the males can go. Or you guys can go, but don't take all your flocks and herds. So he's not really letting them go as a whole people with their flocks and herds to go out into the desert to worship God. The third plague is the dust is turned to gnats, these little bugs, gnats. The fourth is swarms of flies. Now we're getting to this point where the Egyptian magicians are not able to replicate this, and they're advising Pharaoh to listen. Now things get worse. The livestock is destroyed by pestilence next. That's the fifth plague. The sixth is that there's ashes that cause boils. So now it's affecting themselves. The seventh plague is a very bad hailstorm. The eighth is locusts devouring whatever is left of the crops. The ninth is 3 days of darkness. And this is a deep, deep darkness. Now, after I think the gnats, or maybe it's the flies, the Hebrews are not affected by any of these plagues. It's only on the Egyptians. And the Egyptian people are saying, hey, let's let them go already, Pharaoh. But Pharaoh hardens his heart. And it says Pharaoh hardened his heart. So in the presence of the curse, which is God's mercy, God's merciful callback, he is hardening. And he is also hardening his own heart. He is resisting. So remember, natural evil is a callback, and you can either change your way or you can resist. So he's digging in and resisting and becoming hardened. And it's in the presence of these miracles that he becomes hardened. So God's going to use this event to show mercy on the Hebrews and justice on Pharaoh. The last plague is the firstborn die. And this is also where we get the Passover. So the Passover is going to be a permanent part of Judaism. And God said, if you don't let my people go, Israel is my firstborn, God's firstborn. If you don't let my people go, if you don't let my firstborn go, I'll take your firstborn. Moses told the Israelites, you must kill a lamb and take the blood of the lamb and put the blood of the lamb on the top of the doorposts and on the sides. And this is when the angel of the Lord will pass over the homes that have the blood on the doorposts. Now, the blood on the doorposts is symbolic, and it's showing that through the sacrifice, one is covered, one is protected. So remember, this occurred before in the garden when God provided the coats of skin to cover Adam and Eve. So this is the continuation of the promise. The same promise is coming out here. Through the death of another, your sin will be covered. And your covering is present on the doorpost, so the angel of death will pass over those who are covered. That's where you get the term Passover. So after this, Pharaoh's son dies, all the firstborn children die, and Pharaoh says, go, leave, go. So the Israelites leave in haste. They had made bread without yeast. There's no time for the bread to rise. They ate bitter herbs, and they ate the Passover lamb before they left. And they ate with their clothes on, their sandals on. They were ready to leave at any moment's notice. So this is how Jewish families today remember. They observe the Passover in the same way. Unleavened bread, bitter herbs. This is the Seder. And they're remembering how God brought the Hebrews out of Egypt and the significance of the sacrifice. So Pharaoh does change his mind, but then he changes his mind first to let them go, and then he changes his mind after he let them go. He says, oh no, basically we've lost our labor force. We better go back and get them. So he has his army get their chariots ready, and they pursue the Israelites. And the Israelites come to this place where there's the Red Sea before them and Pharaoh and his army behind them, and they're stuck, right? What should they do? This is where Pharaoh cries out to God, and God tells him to use the staff, perform a miracle, part the Red Sea. And so Pharaoh parts the Red Sea, God parts the Red Sea, and the Hebrews cross over safely. 2 million, remember there's 2 million of them, cross over safely. And Pharaoh and his army unthinkingly follows them in, and the waters come down upon the Egyptian army and drowns them. And so God is merciful to the Hebrews and protects them. He's going to lead them through the desert in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. So God is present with them, leading them. And God communicates to the Hebrews through Moses. So God talks to Moses, and Moses communicates to the Hebrews. All right, so the Israelites, the Hebrews, make it out into the desert, and they are going to go through this process of suffering. So remember, the Passover represents forgiveness of sins, but they also have to go through cleansing from sins, just like Adam and Eve leaving the garden. They're forgiven, they're covered, but they have to undergo cleansing, and cleansing is through suffering. Abraham, Jacob, Judah have gone through this process, and now Israel is going through this process too. And the generation that comes out of Egypt did not go through the cleansing process. Unbelief remains in them. They are forgiven, but they have a lot of mixed belief mixed with unbelief. And they're going to end up dying in the wilderness, and their children, those 20 years younger, 20 years old or younger, are going to be the ones who go into the promised land. So this generation, the first generation, is going to die off in the wilderness because of their unbelief. They aren't trusting God. They aren't looking to God. They don't understand as they ought to. Now, they're in the wilderness, and Moses is told to prepare the people, and God is going to speak to them. And after 3 days of preparation, God manifests his presence on Mount Sinai. This is really important because this is going to be the constitution of the nation of Israel. There's a lot of drama involved with this. God has never manifested himself in this way before. So the people are prepared to listen, and God speaks the 10 commandments. He speaks to them, and we'll go over the commandments shortly. But the commandments were not, this is not the first time the commandments are known, let's say. The commandments are written on the heart. They are known from general revelation, but now God is making it more explicit, and this is in connection with the nation of Israel. So there's going to be the moral law in the 10 Commandments. This is a perpetual law. It goes all the way back to the beginning, and it will go on forever. Then they're given the civil law, the laws for the nation of Israel, and they're given the ceremonial law, the religious rituals that they are to perform. All of these laws are connected to how God is redeeming his people. It's teaching them discipline, and it's God's mercy. So there's now the constitution of the nation of Israel, the laws given for them, and the 10 Commandments are a summary of what they are to obey. Now, there are 613 total commandments given in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. So remember, the first 5 books of Moses, we're into those now. 613 commands, 365 are negative commands, don't do this. 248 are positive commands, do this. These are in addition to the 10 Commandments. So I think, maybe we can review the 10 Commandments quickly here, and then I want to go on to the ceremonial laws. So I should draw your attention to the handout really quickly. So we're talking about Moses in Egypt, the call of Moses, the Exodus. This is them leaving Egypt. The law given by God, the moral laws, the 10 Commandments, then the civil laws, the law of the nation, and then the ceremonial laws, the festival and the sacrifices, and then the temple and the priesthood are instituted. This is how the ceremonial law is going to be perpetuated through the generations. There's going to be a tribe of priests. Now that I think of it, maybe I'll pause here and I'll do the law and the temple in the next video. And I think I'm going to use the whiteboard for that one. So wait for something fun and new. Okay.